Salt. So small, so simple, and yet one of the most powerful forces in human history. For most of our existence, salt wasn't just something to flavor food. It was survival itself. Long before refrigeration or canning, salt was the only reliable way to preserve food. Without it, people couldn't store meat, fish, or vegetables for winter, armies couldn't march, and cities couldn't feed their populations. Salt built empires and at times tore them apart. The story of salt begins thousands of years ago. The earliest humans who settled near seas and salt springs quickly realized that animals and humans were drawn to these white crystals. By the time of early farming societies, around 6000 BCE, people in China and Eastern Europe were already boiling salty water to produce salt cakes. In China, some of the oldest known saltworks were found in the Sichuan region, large clay vessels used to evaporate brine. This white gold would later become a foundation of the Chinese state. In ancient Egypt, salt had both a practical and sacred meaning. Egyptians learned to dry and preserve fish, meat, and even vegetables with salt from the Nile Delta. Without salt, they couldn't have survived the heat of the desert climate. But salt's greatest use was in mummification, preserving the bodies of pharaohs with a special kind of natural salt called natron. It prevented decay, a symbol of eternity. In a sense, salt gave even death an afterlife. In Mesopotamia, salt was a sign of civilization. The ancient Sumerians used salt in trade, food, and rituals. In Babylon, it was part of religious offerings. Because salt was difficult to obtain inland, cities near the sea or salt springs grew wealthy. This pattern repeated across the world. Salt created centers of power. The Greeks and Romans refined the salt trade into an empire-wide system. Rome even had an official salt road, the Via Salaria, along which salt was brought from coastal salt pans to the capital. Roman soldiers were given salarium, a salt allowance, which is where our word salary comes from. It wasn't symbolic. Salt literally fed the army. Without it, they couldn't preserve pork, fish, or olives for long military campaigns. In Europe, before refrigeration, salt determined how far food could travel. Fresh meat spoiled within days, but salted meat could last months. This made salt essential not only to armies, but also to sailors. The great voyages of exploration, from Columbus to Magellan, would not have been possible without barrels of salted beef and fish. In this way, salt quietly powered the age of discovery. Medieval Europe revolved around salt in another way, through preservation and taxation. People salted everything: pork, beef, fish, butter, even cheese. Northern Europe depended heavily on salted herring, which fed entire cities during fasting seasons when the church banned meat. The demand for salt made some towns immensely rich. Salzburg in Austria, literally salt fortress, and Hallstatt before it became symbols of white gold. In Poland, the Wieliczka salt mine became so large that underground chapels were carved entirely from salt, and it operated for over 700 years. But where there is necessity, there is control. Governments realized that whoever taxed or monopolized salt could control the people. In France, the gabelle, a salt tax, became one of the most hated laws of the monarchy. Every family had to buy a fixed amount of salt from royal warehouses at a high price. For poor peasants, it was unbearable. The salt tax helped ignite public anger that eventually exploded into the French Revolution. Something similar happened in Russia. Salt was essential there, not only for flavor, but for survival through the long winters. It preserved fish, cabbage, and meat when fresh food was impossible to find. But in 1648, Tsar Alexei Mikhailovich sharply increased the salt tax to refill the state treasury. Prices soared. The poor could no longer afford enough salt to store their food, and hunger spread. The result was the famous Salt Riot in Moscow, an uprising of citizens demanding justice. It showed that salt, though small, could shake a kingdom. Across the world, salt shaped trade and empire. In Africa, caravans of camels carried great slabs of salt from the Sahara to the cities of Mali, trading them for gold. In medieval Timbuktu, salt was so valuable that people said it was worth its weight in gold. In Ethiopia, blocks of salt, amole, were used as currency until the 20th century. In Japan, salt was so revered that it was used in purification rituals, a tradition still seen at sumo tournaments today. Salt also played a surprising role in the age of colonialism. The British Empire, recognizing salt's necessity, used it to control its colonies. In India, local people were forbidden to make their own salt and were forced to buy heavily taxed British salt. It was this injustice that led Mahatma Gandhi to launch the Salt March in 1930, a peaceful protest that became one of the defining moments in India's struggle for independence. Gandhi's followers walked 240 miles to the sea, where they made salt by hand, defying imperial law. The act was simple, but its symbolism was enormous. Freedom could begin with something as small as a grain of salt. The 19th century brought scientific advances that changed how salt was produced. Large-scale mining and evaporation techniques made salt cheaper and more accessible. Yet it remained vital. The Industrial Revolution used salt in chemical manufacturing to make glass, soap, chlorine, and later, plastics. Salt had moved beyond food to become a building block of modern industry. In the 20th century, science gave salt yet another role in public health. Many regions suffered from iodine deficiency, leading to goiter and other thyroid problems. The solution was simple: adding small amounts of iodine to table salt. Iodized salt quickly became one of the most successful global health programs in history, saving millions of lives with almost no cost. Today, salt is everywhere, in our kitchens, our industries, and even our roads, where it melts ice in winter. But not all salt is the same. Table salt is refined and pure, while sea salt, rock salt, and Himalayan pink salt each contain trace minerals that give them unique colors and flavors. The variety we enjoy today is a modern luxury. For most of history, people were grateful just to have enough to survive. Even though salt is cheap and abundant now, it hasn't lost its symbolism. Across cultures, it still represents purity, hospitality, and friendship. In many countries, bread and salt are offered to honored guests, a gesture of peace that dates back centuries. We toss salt over our shoulder for luck, and we say that someone is worth their salt to mean they are capable and deserving, echoes of a time when salt was life itself. From ancient salt pans in China to the frozen roads of Siberia, from Egyptian tombs to Gandhi's march to the sea, salt has shaped human history more than almost any other substance. It preserved our food, fueled our economies, inspired revolutions, and connected distant worlds. It may look like an ordinary crystal, but salt is the reason civilization could endure. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and comment to join the journey through history. See you in the next video.